stronger than me. Straight into the face that tells you to rattle your chains. If you love being free. Lord, I could cry. Cause power is my love when my love reaches to me. James Brown cried power. Seagull cried power. More than cried power. James cried power. Lily cried power. Hattie cried power. Billy power. Dylan power. Woody power. Nina cried power.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second panel of the day. I'm Deandra Rose, Director of Research for Polis, the Center of Politics, and I welcome you to our virtual symposium, The Vote, Reimagining What It Could Be. We're excited to have a super panel for you today, made up of student activists representing multiple North Carolina colleges and universities. And this panel is titled Citizen Student, College Students on the Front Lines of Democracy. And we have just a fantastic lineup for you today. I'm really excited to hear from these activists. And leading us in discussion today will be Duke's own Chris Simmons. Chris Simmons is the Associate Vice President at Duke University who heads the Office of Government Relations, Chris arrived at Duke in 2006 after serving in lead advocacy roles for the Association of American Universities and the American Council of Education in Washington, D.C. Chris serves as Duke's principal point person and spokesperson on legislative and regulatory issues involving the federal government, Congress, and the administration in areas such as student financial aid, academic research, international education, tax policy, intellectual property, and immigration. He also oversees Duke in DC, which is Duke's academic center and home for research and official events in Washington, DC. I'm also excited to say that Chris is a valued member of the Polis Steering Committee, and we are very lucky to have him leading this discussion. So without further ado, actually with a little bit of further ado, Chris, if it's okay, I want to remind you that if you want to tweet with us during this session, we're using the hashtag Reimagine the Vote 2020. Our Polis team will be tweeting. You can find us on Twitter, and we'll share that handle with you. And this session will talk for about 40 minutes or so. Chris will lead this discussion, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions. So please do submit your questions in the Q&A box. Okay, Chris, it's all yours.
Great, Deandra, thank you so much for asking me to participate. When I looked at the program for the 2 days a while back, I thought this looked like a really fascinating topic, and then I was totally stoked to be asked to moderate it. So I'm excited to be here. I also have to say, I am helping with a class at the University of North Carolina right now with a bunch of undergraduate students. I'm an academic advisor at Duke as well, and I'm the father of a freshman in college. And so I'm hearing more and more and more than ever in my life about the engagement of college students in this election, in democracy, and getting people registered to vote and getting involved in the issues. So it's great to be a part of this and to be listening to these outstanding student leaders on what they're doing to help us. So let's go ahead and introduce our panel. And the biographies are on the website, and I'll ask everyone to just let up their video so we can see your wonderful faces and great smiles. And what I'd like to do, and since your biographies are already on the website, I'm not going to introduce you and all of the wonderful things you've done so people can read about you. But I'd like to start off, and we'll go alphabetically, so we'll start with Brittany. I wonder if you could just tell us your name, where you go to school, and then tell our audience something about that has shocked you or surprised you in the work that you've been doing over the last 6 to 8 months on voting, getting students engaged. So let's start with Brittany, and then we'll go to Cora, Jess, and then finish up with Thomas.
Thank you for that question, Chris. My name is Brittany Morgan. I am a senior criminal justice student at North Carolina Central University. Being a voting advocate, what has surprised me since the summer when I started was the miseducation of people. And yes, I didn't say uneducated, I said miseducated people, because I've seen a lot of people like sway people wrong of what voting is. I've seen a lot of people didn't have certain resources towards voting. That found me very surprised, especially when I did phone banking with felons. Some felons didn't realize they could vote. So the miseducation of voting really surprised me this year.
Great. Cora?
Hi, my name is Cora. I'm a student at UNC. I do a lot of work through the Institute of Politics there, through their civic engagement arm. And I've been really surprised this year, not just by, like Brittany said, the miseducation of voters, especially young voters, but the general lack of engagement that I've seen, especially given that this has been a historic summer, a historic year, and a historic election. And you see a lot of engagement, especially on social media, and people having conversations, but there's a real disconnect between that engagement online and that engagement in like action and activism. And I think that that's a really interesting problem that we are facing as young organizers and young activists.
Hey, Jess.
Hill. And I think this election cycle, I've kind of been really just interested, like Brittany and Cora mentioned, kind of this lack of spreading good information to the general population. Like I've seen so much information circulating around on like social medias, and I feel like that just isn't really connecting to the voters in real life and getting them real questions, getting their real questions answered. Yeah.
Hey, Thomas.
Hi, I'm Thomas. I'm a student at Duke University. And I definitely agree with all the other panelists have said, but on a slightly more positive note, I do feel like voting and politics generally has gone in the past few months from something that students and people our age were often hesitant to talk about with one another to something that people are much more comfortable discussing with their friends and pushing their friends to vote and to engage. So that's something that's definitely positively surprised me this cycle.
So I'm the things that surprise you, you know, three of you mentioned misinformation and also lack of engagement, which also create barriers. And I was wondering if maybe you could each kind of think about and tell our audience how you're breaking that down and how you're working to alleviate misinformation and engaging people more. And I guess we'll start with Thomas, since he was really positive and with his input, and tell us how he's breaking it down. And then I'd love to hear from the rest of you as well.
Yeah, I think in terms of breaking down information, what's helped is being there, engaging people one-on-one, saying, hey, like, I want to help you through this process of registering and voting, and then walking through it with them either on like a FaceTime, on a Zoom call, person to person. And that way, as questions come up, you can be there to answer them, and you can be someone who you sort of committed from taking a voter from the start, from registering to finishing, to getting that vote in, however they choose to vote. And I think just being there for them versus just sending a one-time text or posting something on social media, that's something that we've really been trying to do at Duke, and I think that's been really positive so far.
Cora, Brittany, Jess, do you guys, how are you dealing with misinformation and lack of engagement, and how are you breaking down those barriers?
I'm dealing with misinformation and breaking down barriers strictly by just meeting people where they are. I think that's a big problem that we're having now. People try to bring people the ballot and they don't understand what's on it. Or, you know, people like, well, college students, they try to throw all these words out to college students about what's going on in the election. Like, what is this? So my biggest thing at Central is meeting students where they are. So if the student don't know this, you educate them and you start from where they are. And I think that's the biggest part of breaking barriers within the voting cycle.
Cora, Jess, do you have anything to add?
I definitely agree with Brittany that meeting people where they are is a huge chunk of what we do. I think we're also trying to meet people who wouldn't choose to be involved. When you start off a new project with organizing, you always make a mental list of who am I going to reach out to, who do I want to be involved with, and that can end up accidentally excluding and disenfranchising a lot of people. So I know that at UNC, our group, we try to reach out a lot to STEM students. We try to get our information on the biology and the chemistry listservs, because those are students that people who, like me, who do organizing work as their entire lives, they don't think about students who don't necessarily choose to be involved in those spaces. And we're also just trying to not give up on people. We do a lot of follow-up at SEAC. We do a lot of reaching out to people again and again and again, just to check in and make sure, because you know, you can check in on someone and they say, oh yeah, I'm going to request my absentee ballot tomorrow, and you can check them off their list, or you can check in with them tomorrow. So it's really an everyday kind of task that we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I actually work with Cora at UNC, and I think one of the big things we do is not just repeatedly going to these voters, but also kind of breaking down what a lot of this information and language means, because I think oftentimes we can see this overload of information, and lots of times people don't even really know where to start. And even like personal friends of mine have kind of just come to me and texted me and been like, "Hey, Jesse, like I'm really confused about this aspect of it." So I think one really important thing that we're doing at UNC is taking all of this information and just putting it into everyday terms that are really easy to understand, and really easy like flow charts to get someone from something as simple as like a change of address for their registration, all the way to maybe requesting an absentee ballot for the first time, and just really breaking down how the easiest way to go about those things is.
Great. So when we talked in the past, the five of us have talked, and you all have different support structures on your efforts to work with students and get them involved in your efforts on voting and democracy, whether it's from off-campus groups to groups that you formed on campus, to your own institutions, to local national parties. I'm really interested to know where you feel like you're getting the most support from those outside groups, and where you would like more support, and in what way, over the next 25, 27 days, whatever we're at now. Any of you can jump in.
I guess I'll start. I'm also a MTV poll defender, and we received $500 grant. They're always throwing out money to help with the efforts of students being able to vote. Also, You Can Vote, that I have a fellowship with as well. They have host couch parties. So they give out free pizza and stuff to get students involved. So receiving a lot of grant money to get students motivated is a big thing, because that is a barrier. Students aren't motivated. So receiving grant money to help students get motivated, and having resources, because everyone don't go to institutions with a lot of resources. So that's very big.
And Brittany, do you feel like you have good support from NCCU administration, faculty, and staff in your efforts?
Oh yes, NCCU are very big on civic engagement. Of course,
Great.
when we're having a law school there, they're really big about voting and everything else with civic engagement.
Great.
I think kind of to
Go ahead.
I think kind of to parallel what Brittany said, particularly at UNC, I think I've really noticed, and one thing that I really appreciate is we have a lot of support kind of on a smaller administration level. Like I'm getting a lot of support from faculty, from student groups, and they're kind of like big organizational leaders among student groups. But I feel like our administration can at times be kind of slow about responding, or respond in ways that maybe they think are helpful, but aren't necessarily the most in line with the political groups on campus and their goals to kind of get information out to people. They'll kind of work on their own thing and not really necessarily always consult us. So that can be kind of a challenge, but I think our faculty are doing a really, really good job of kind of picking up there and really working with all of us, which I think is really great.
Yeah, I can jump in now, and I'd say the same about Duke's faculty. Administration's been really helpful so far. I'm not directly on leadership for Duke Votes, but I've worked with them, and Duke this fall has had a no tabling rule. So clubs normally sit out and do tabling to get new members, but they've allowed Duke Votes to set up a tent outside, and they've been able to register, I think, a few hundred students that way, just by having a tent in a spot where lots of students walk through and can register. And I've also seen lots of faculty just sending out information on listservs, and not even like my statistics listserv that I'm on. I saw faculty just sent out a little voting guide, and that kind of thing really helps. But I do feel like at the end of the day, faculty and outside groups can bring down barriers and provide information, but I do really think it's on students, because we're the ones who know the other students, and in the end, it's going to be our job to connect with those people and find those people and make sure they vote.
Great.
So I think I might come from a little bit of a different place, because I also do work in organizing for an off-campus group. I'm an organizer on behalf of Planned Parenthood, Planned Parenthood Votes. And I think what we see a lot with off-campus and on-campus groups and partisan and nonpartisan groups is a lack of coordination on a large scale that I think oftentimes hurts the efforts that we're doing, because you have all of these different groups trying to do the same work, and at the end of the day, it becomes too many cooks. So I think what we're trying to do, especially at SEAC, Jesse and I, are create this broad coalition of a coordinated effort where we're all trying to work together and do the same thing. And that, I think, has made it not only more effective what we're doing, it's a better use of our time, but it's also allowed us to delegate within groups. We're really close partners with the Young Democrats at UNC and with NC PIRG, and we're able to use those partnerships to target more specifically, but also more effectively. So instead of sending things to students from 3 different groups, we're trying to send them to students from one group, one place, in order to not overwhelm them. Because I think a lot of that fatigue and overwhelmed lack of interest in voting is based on that lack of structural support between the groups.
So at the risk of stating the obvious, the situation that college students are in right now, with dealing with the pandemic, mostly working in isolation on your academics, Zoom calls, recorded lectures, you're under an incredible amount of stress, and so are your classmates. And I think all of us are really sympathetic to that. On top of it, I think, like you, you feel the pressures of the election and probably are at a place where you just want to get it over with. And then there's been so many things that have happened since the pandemic started, including the death of Justice Ginsburg, the protests that resulted, from everything that's happened in Minneapolis to Breonna Taylor, to what's happening in Portland. Tell me a little bit about kind of how this fog that you guys are all in, and I know you're in it, how that's impacting your engagement with students and what you're hearing from students, if that's a motivator to vote, or if it's suppressing some of that energy, or if it's a combination of those things.
And kind of like you mentioned, with all these protests this summer, I've definitely heard a lot more of my friends and my peers in my community be just really excited and really, really pushing to get out the vote in ways that I don't think that they would have if this weren't such a historic election year with all of these things happening. But on the other hand, I think that kind of being in this isolated sort of online setting is also pushing people to kind of forget about deadlines, kind of like wait until the last minute to really get things done. Like over at UNC, we've been pushing for people to register to vote. And in this last week alone, because the deadline to vote is tomorrow, and in this last week alone, just in the past few days even, I've had so many people like rushing to get in that last minute registration, which is, I think, kind of interesting in ways that in the primaries, I think definitely I noticed a lot more people in the spring being like, yeah, like I'm registered weeks and weeks in advance and I'm really on top of it. So I think that kind of has to do with the pandemic and kind of being online. But I haven't really noticed people having a lack of wanting to vote and wanting to be active because of it.
Great. Others?
I received a sense of motivation dealing with protesting, especially just seeing people in my community as well. I've been seeing around the world more of humanity over politics. A lot of people have been wanting to engage in what's going on dealing with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. I feel it brought people together. A lot of people woken up. They're like, wow, I didn't know this was still here. It's like, yeah, like let's wake up. So a lot of people, they haven't even made any further comments. All I hear people now say is go vote, go vote. And it's really good to see people that motivated to get out and vote this year. So the protests definitely motivate people to vote this year, and definitely losing the Supreme Court judge that was super big this year as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Brittany. I think sort of what I mentioned in my first comment about people being more willing to just talk about these things now is in large part because of those protests and because of all the outrage that sparked in people. And I really do think people woke up to a lot of things following those protests. And I think that's resulted in a much more engagement than you would have otherwise seen. And same with Justice Ginsburg's death. I do agree with Chris that there's sort of a fog, and I think this election has been coming up for so long now. Like it's just been coming up and coming up and coming up that I do think people are starting to burn out. Our group, a group I'm involved with in LEAD on Duke's campus, Swing NC, we've been doing voter outreach since June. And at this point in October, it gets hard for people to just keep getting back on the phones, to keep having these conversations, especially with all this crazy news coming in about Trump having COVID, other people having COVID. It definitely gets hard when it goes this long and everything's over Zoom to stay focused and to keep the stakes of the election in mind. So that is a challenge that we're definitely facing.
I definitely agree that there's fatigue. I also think that while each piece of bad and heartbreaking news does serve as a kick in the pants for students, there's been so much. And I think every time something new and horrible happens, there's less of a reaction to it because people are just, they're tired of being upset all the time. Like I know that over the summer when George Floyd was killed, there was a huge outcry and it was really incredible to watch people react to that for not the first time, but the biggest time in my lifetime. But nothing has happened there, that hasn't been solved, but people have stopped turning out like they were in the summer. And I think that is not a problem because people don't have the attention span to deal with, like you said, being in school and their lives and also being outraged and in a state of emergency every minute of every day. But I do think that it is harmful to like activists and would-be activists to always be at a 10. And I think that has had a bit of a detrimental effect on the work that we're doing. I also think that because, like I said, like nothing has changed, that those problems haven't been solved. There hasn't been justice for George Floyd or Breonna Taylor. And that, I think, fact of America and the systems that we are trying to convince people to vote in not really being just it's gotten some people to really want to turn out to vote to change that, but it's also, I think, disillusioned a lot of people further and created a situation where some people that we're trying to reach out to don't see a point because they think that the system is broken beyond repair, which is a little bit sad to see, if I'm being honest, but it's also really wonderful to see people that are inspired to change the way that things are.
So I was going to save this comment to the end of our session, but just listening to the four of you and not to put more pressure on you, I'm so damn glad you guys are involved and are leading because we need you. And I'm just really proud of you and your colleagues and your friends and other students that are doing the work that you're doing. But I was going to say that, and I just felt very moved by what you guys just said, and I appreciate it. College campuses across the country, by and large, faculty, students, staff, tend to be a little more liberal. I think we would all agree, but we're not monolithic institutions, and we don't represent 100% of one party. And this is something the five of us have talked about briefly. I was wondering if each of you can give us an example of something that you have done where you have engaged over the last 6-8 months, or where members of your groups have engaged, quote unquote, across the aisle and worked with people and individuals and groups that might represent another point of view, but of the same goal of getting people to vote and engage.
Is kind of outreach for our group, SEAC. And one thing I think that's been especially important is kind of just taking into account what groups have reached out to us and what groups have directly come to us, and kind of understanding what demographics they bring to the table. And so a lot of those groups that tend to like really push out and reach out to us tend to be liberal. So on the flip side, working to be nonpartisan and kind of working to reach across the aisle is targeting specific student groups that may not have the same beliefs, but are political beliefs, but still do believe in getting out the vote, which is equally important regardless of your political party. It's just important to foster a culture where people are civically engaged. So specifically, like one thing that I've been doing is really reaching out to like the young Republicans on our campus, like reaching out to groups that I know those people that are involved with young Republicans are also in. So kind of like cross-listed groups, really just reaching out to every student group and really hitting all of them with the same intensity, and not just being satisfied with just having a certain political ideology represented in our communications and talks. Like I think it's really important that everyone is represented at this table.
Yeah, I think so the group I'm involved with at Duke is partisan and left leaning, but we did have recently an event that we wanted to just be a nonpartisan voter registration event. And like Jesse said, we reached out to Duke College Republicans, which unfortunately doesn't exist, but they forwarded it on to the guy I reached out to forwarded it on to a conservative discussion group he's part of. But I also think something important is being willing to have conversations with people across the aisle. I think a lot of conservative students on college campuses feel like they can't voice their beliefs without sparking outrage from fellow students. And I think just being willing to listen, like last night, I had this great 1-hour conversation with a friend of mine who was really trying to decide between voting for Trump and Biden. And I think just really listening to him really helped. And afterwards, he reached out to me and was like, hey, that was one of the better political conversations I've had. And I think one thing that Jesse mentioned is you see less interest sometimes from conservative groups in terms of getting involved. I think that might be because of a sense of, hey, like we feel not wanted here. So I think being willing to have those conversations and hear people out and talk with them can help get rid of that barrier and make them feel wanted in this space.
So Thomas, just to follow up on that, how do we fix that? I mean, it can't just be the students that fix that.
Yeah, outside, I mean, I think the students are important. I think like part of where I come from in saying that is I took a few great classes last year, one on political polarization and then one on conservatism. And I'm not a conservative person, but I think taking classes like that and having a school offer classes like that, definitely learn a lot there. And then I'm not gonna go into how on a national level we can fix that, because that's definitely a whole other conversation. But I do think, I think the main thing is like person to person, not just shutting people down right away and being willing to, I think it always just comes back to listening, being able to listen to people and not trying to just attack their character right away, just hearing what they have to say.
Brittany, what are your thoughts on this?
I definitely had a lot of engagement with nonpartisan work. All the work that I do is nonpartisan. I'm doing a lot of phone banking and text banking. People automatically assume, liberal views or Democrat. And it's just like, well, I just want you to vote. I didn't actually tell you who to vote for or anything, but people are just like so angry about voting. I guess it's a stigma around voting. And like you said, to break that stigma and what Thomas said, it's just a simple conversation. I'm not sure if anyone was watching the debate last night, but the last question was the best question to me when the little girl asked, how do you get people to stop being so angry with each other? How do you stop all the commotion? Because if the leader's not in charge, if the leaders aren't doing the right thing, how do we supposed to do the right thing as citizens? I thought that was really big. So I feel like it starts with the leaders. As you said, college students, we can't just change everything. But if we all try to have open conversations and diversity, I think it would definitely help with, not being one-sided and the stigma against voting.
how are you guys talking to your friends, talking to faculty, thinking about the university, thinking about November 4th? And how you're mentally, emotionally, physically preparing for what happens November 4th or November 3rd, or maybe weeks later, or there will eventually be an outcome one way or another. And I think it's a big topic of conversation. How are you guys thinking about that?
So I've been trying to phrase it as something that is special and different and has never happened before. Obviously, there are elections every single year. There are national midterm elections every other year. There's a presidential election every 4 years. But this year, I do believe that North Carolina specifically is a special place to be doing this work. We are one of the closest swing states for the presidency. We are one of the closest U.S. Senate races in the country right now. And we are one of the states where young people turning out to vote will be the deciding factor in what happens with this election. So when I do my outreach, when I talk to voters, I try to emphasize that our values in North Carolina are going to have a massive impact on the entire country, and how we choose to exercise our right to vote, how we choose to allow our personal values and our values of democracy and participation is really going to matter, not just to us individually, but to like millions of people. And I think that emphasizing that importance has been a really big one for us.
Other thoughts or things you've been thinking about for that post-election?
It's not necessarily just all about the election. Come November 4th, come, whenever we get the results from this election, I think that it's still really important that we continue to keep engaging with our communities, that we continue to, regardless of who's in office, hold them accountable for what they promised, and hold them accountable for the beliefs that we all hold. They're in office to represent us, and I think that sometimes we can forget that, and that we elected our legislators, we elected the president into office, and they're there to serve us at the end of the day. So regardless of who wins what race, I think it's really important to just keep pushing forward what we believe in and what we want to see happen with our government. And I think that just continuing regardless of what happens, and just trying to keep the momentum going.
Definitely follow up what Jesse said. I've been telling people, change doesn't happen overnight. That's the biggest thing. So whatever you think is going to happen on November 3rd, change doesn't happen overnight. The society is not going to just snap back into what you want it to be and your views overnight. That's not what's going to happen. So it's definitely holding people accountable. I tell people all the time, I have a few friends, they be like, well, my vote might not even really count. Stuff get rigged. I'm like, well, if it does get rigged and if it don't, what's versus you going to the polls versus you sitting on your couch? Which one are you going to choose? You know what I'm saying? Then some people, I tell them, if you talk about change, you're at the protest holding a sign. If you're going to be at the protest holding a sign, you're going to just talk about change, you're going to be about the change. So it's definitely about holding people accountable, like Jesse's mentioned. And, it's not going to happen overnight. So hopefully, stuff isn't going to be a good outcome. I already know it's not going to be a good outcome with everything that's going on, because it is different. But just wishing for the best. Hopefully everybody have, more humanity. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo Brittany in saying that change doesn't happen overnight. So no matter what happens in November, we're going to have to keep fighting for a lot of things either way. So just keeping that in mind. But everyone else covered it pretty well.
So I have a couple more questions, but I want to tell our attendees that are watching and listening right now to be thinking of their questions for the panel, and that we'll pose those in just a minute. So I have two kind of practical questions for you. And the first one is, tell me what you think has been the most effective use by one of your groups of social media in the last month.
Is kind of taking advantage of Instagram has these like ask a question sort of like functions. And so like one thing that I've noticed, lots of political groups, not just ours and not just on UNC's campus, have really been utilizing that anonymous feature to kind of submit an anonymous question, just being like, when do I need to request my absentee ballot by? Where do I go to early vote? And just kind of asking these questions and being able to answer them on a platform that ends up reaching a lot of people, either directly, like direct engagement with those stories, and posts and infographics that can be created based off of like if we're getting a lot of those questions, but just that knowledge now in the hands of people who are able to casually mention it to their friends because they hear that their friend asked a question and they're like, oh, I had that question answered on Instagram. So I think I've definitely noticed a really big increase in kind of the engagement of groups through social media, like directly with people and their questions.
Well, since COVID, there's definitely been a creative juice flowing with virtual and social media things going around. Like I mentioned earlier, the couch party, you can vote hosted. That was pretty big, virtual to get students involved. Instagram, if anybody noticed, the little register to vote sticker they have, you can just click on it, go straight to register to vote. Many things that people been using in social media. I know me and my chapter, Alpha Lena, the Delta Sigma Theta at Central, we have been using a lot of videos to try to, get people to watch. A lot of people, sometimes they read flyers, but flyers can sometimes just get skimmed over and thrown away. So we try to do videos, engagement, different things, but, social media has really taken over since COVID.
Yeah, I think Instagram stories have become an increasingly big way that people share information. I think what's great about those is if you coordinate an effort through a lot of people, you can like make sure things get seen. So we use that for our group. Like when we were just starting up, one way that we got a lot of people to join is like we'd coordinate with our members on like flooding Instagram stories. So when people click through, like they're going to see this information and say like, oh, like I want to help out. We can be really clear, like this is how you can help. And then they can easily join something like that. And the other thing, this isn't like directly through my group, but something that just so many students have been doing is just posting like voting information and like registering deadlines like over and over and over again. And I think like you can't not see them at this point, which is really, really helpful in a time when all of us are like kind of stuck in our homes. It's a way to still put this like, hey, this is happening now. You need to see this and you need to do something.
So my last question before we go to our guests who have been listening to this conversation, I'm really interested in, there's not a day that's gone by, especially in the last couple of weeks, where we haven't had a question from a student group, a faculty member, a staff person at Duke, asking a question about the rules or where or how a student registers to vote, where they should register, how they should vote. And I would say that there are some gray areas for North Carolina law, and I know you guys have been very engaged in those things. If you could change one thing about North Carolina's voting law, what would that one thing be?
Okay, I feel really passionate about this. So North Carolina has early voting. We have really long early voting, which I love. I think it's wonderful. And during early voting, there is same-day registration. And when you go for same-day registration, you can update your address right before you go to vote, as long as you bring proof of residency with you, like a water bill. I want to expand that to Election Day. I want it so bad. I think that there's no reason for it not to be a part of Election Day if it's a part of early voting. It doesn't affect the security of it, clearly. I think that it's probably just a tactic to not allow as many people to do same-day registration because maybe they forget about same-day or early voting. And I think that that would really be a really great improvement to the way that we vote in North Carolina, and a lot of other states do it too.
I would definitely reassess, alter, is the fact that when you submit your absentee ballot, if your signature is too drastically different from the signature that the DMV has on file for you, they will actually reject your absentee ballot. And so we've already been seeing that this is an issue with this election. Lots of ballots are being turned away, not necessarily because of voter fraud, but just because people's signatures can change over time. Maybe people weren't aware that they had to perfectly try to recreate what they gave to the DMV, which for a lot of voters may have been years and years and years ago. Since if you need to renew your license, a lot of times you don't actually need to go physically into the DMV, like you can just reorder it online. And over time, people's signatures do change. And so I think that definitely, and I don't have a perfect answer for this, but I think reassessing the standards by which we reject those ballots for small things like signatures and don't then go on to not inform voters that their ballot was rejected, I think definitely needs to change.
Well, I guess this is coming from a criminal justice major, so this can be a little biased in my opinion, but allowing felons who are on probation to be able to vote, I know that is something that I'm really passionate about, just because, you know, someone can be seen as a criminal, it can definitely hold a certain community or a voice of people back. You know, that's definitely something within the Black community that's held us back over the years with mass incarceration and, you know, the drug era, everything that's been going on. I think that definitely would be a big change in voting if we allow people who are on probation to be able to vote.
Yeah, I think love what everyone's already said for sure. I think one last thing I'd add is that gerrymandering in North Carolina is a huge problem. North Carolina has some of the worst gerrymandering in the country. Been this way for over a decade. It's really partisanly targeted and also racially targeted, which is super, super messed up. And one thing that I know a lot of Democrats are running on in North Carolina state legislature is putting in place an independent redistricting committee following this 2020 census. So I think that is something, regardless of whether it's Democrats who do it or Republicans, that I'd really love to see happen, because gerrymandering, not cool, and it really increases the feeling that your votes don't matter when they're being unfairly used or contained.
Excellent. Very good. So I'm inviting our guests and the attendees to the webinar to submit their own questions to the panel in the chat function. And let's see what we have here. Actually, in the Q&A section, we do have the Q&A function. I apologize. We do have one question from a good friend of mine from Duke, one of our professors. And I think you got to this you touched on this before, but the Heart Leadership Program at Duke is currently doing a 30-second or less spots to try to persuade peers to vote that may not be inclined to do so. And the question is, what message has been most successful in persuading reluctant students to engage and vote? And maybe if you have a story, you don't all have to answer, but if one of you has a great example, we'd love to hear it.
So this sounds a little bit bad, but my favorite way to get people to vote is to leverage social pressure. People aren't always going to vote because they should, but they will vote if they think that other people would judge them for not voting, which is obviously not the most nice way to do it, I guess, because I think a lot of people want to be told oh, I tell people to vote because it's the best thing to do. But that's not why people vote. People vote because they think that they should. So when COVID was not around, I used to walk my friends to go vote again and again and again, because at UNC there's a polling place right off campus. So I would go like a couple times a week at lunch with whoever I was eating lunch with. I was like, have you voted yet? And they would say no. And I would say, well, it's early voting. You can go right now. Do you want me to show you where it is? And then they can't say no because they don't have anywhere to go. And I know that. So it's a little bit harder to leverage that social pressure with COVID because you're not in person with people. So I've been checking in with my friends that I know might not vote again and again and being like, hey, have you voted yet? Do you have a plan? Because I think the most effective measures with people who aren't going to vote because it's the right thing to do are to make people think that you need them to vote, like personally. And it's been pretty successful for me.
I actually have a really fun story. So one of my close friends who lives in Maryland, it was very, very reluctant to vote. And she was just telling me over and over, my vote doesn't matter. I don't really care who wins the presidential election. And I think one thing that really got through to her, and unfortunately, I don't know whether or not she's going to choose to vote for the presidency, but I did actually sway her mind to vote on local and state elections by just reminding her that a lot of times our local elections can come down to literally a matter of like 5 votes, being the difference between like who is running things in your town, who your House representative is in the state legislature, who your state senator is. Things like that can really, really, really matter. And your vote truly does matter there, even if those voters are inclined to believe that it doesn't matter for the presidential or like bigger elections like that, which it still does. But I think just really reminding people that on small issues in your town, like if you really care about them, you should at least be voting in local elections. And I think that I've actually changed several minds by that, which is pretty cool.
I think another thing that's helpful is reminding people that voting isn't about them. It's about the impact that they're going to see in this country, in their state, in wherever their city, their town, wherever they live. I think some people are like, what's in it for me? Why should I care? It's like, maybe because you should care about what happens to other people too. And that sounds bad, but in the same way, I think reframing it for some people away from like, oh, this is you, whether they're a Democrat or Republican, talking about the big issues that are at stake, because there are very real things that are going to change for so many people in this country based on the outcome of the election. So making sure people understand that their vote isn't just about them, it's about all of us.
Brittany, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm not going to add anything. I'm just going to say what they were going to say. So
Okay, great. Well, so Brittany, since your mic was just off, question for you to start off with. We had another question in the Q&A about what you think is the most important component of your plan to get out the vote the next month. What are you thinking is your number one component, number one thing you're going to emphasize? Let's start with you, Brittany.
I guess I would say my number one component is making sure that I have a plan if I can't go to early voting or I can't go somewhere. My biggest thing with NC Central students is that if we get sent home, what are you going to do? So, if you're registered in Durham, do you have your absentee ballot sent to you? Where is this ballot going to be sent to? I think that's the biggest things on campus students. For myself, I had to do a change of address. So that's a very big component in voting. So making sure I fully have my voting plan because of COVID, making sure COVID don't switch too much of what's going
on. So at SEAC, our biggest thing is partnerships, and one of our favorite partners are the lovely people at Duke Votes. So I think that our partnership with them is one of the most important components of our Get Out the Vote strategy, just because, you work at Duke. The rivalry is an inspirer for a lot of students, and we are able to use our friendship with Duke Votes to have events that get people more excited than they might be otherwise if it was just one of us or the other. So I think that, finding ways to make get out the vote as interesting as possible is the most important aspect of what we're going to be doing for the next 26 days.
I think for me and my group, it's about having people's friends get their friends to vote. We're going to be trying to keep track of who has voted, who hasn't, but the main thing is going to be people, like we did an event, I think last week, where people came up with a list of like 10 or 15 friends and checked in with all of them. And it's about following up with those friends and making sure they get to the finish line, because it definitely helps to have someone you don't know ask you to vote, but it helps a lot more, like we've talked about earlier with social pressure, is having your friends help you with that. So we're going to be having definitely more events going forward where it's going to be based on you thinking through, okay, who in your network have you not checked in with about voting? And the great thing about college students is that we generally have really big networks on our campus. So collectively, we can reach out to a ton of students that way, and that will make sure that those students get to the polls.
Jess, did you want to add anything?
Like in our plan to get out the vote is just reminding people again and again and again of these extended deadlines. Like I know a lot of people are planning to vote with absentee ballots for the first time. And while technically in North Carolina, we have until October 27th to request that, knowing that that request, because of the overload on USPS, is going to take so much longer, reminding people that we really need to get it done earlier, reminding people that if you can vote early, why not vote early? And just really getting people to kind of reimagine the time frame that we're working with. For a lot of people, myself included, our parents always voted on election day, or like they chose to vote on election day in previous elections, and just reminding them that this is a different election with this pandemic, and we really need to focus on getting our votes into our Board of Elections before, or as early as possible, and before election day if possible.
We don't have another question in the Q&A, but one of our guests pointed out that he believes that North Carolina does not in fact signature match. And so I'd encourage all of us to look at those rules. It's really important to sign your ballot and to have a signature witness. But it was pointed out that that may not be entirely correct. I don't know if any of you want to respond or. That's okay. We don't have any other questions. It's the end of this session. I want to just express my deep gratitude to each of you for taking out time to participate in this, to prepare for this. I know you guys have, you all have a lot of work to do academically. You have a lot of volunteering. You have a lot of self-care to do, taking care of others, and to take time to be a part of this panel. We really appreciate that dedication to sharing your thoughts, your interests, and all the important work you're doing. And I think I speak for everyone who's listening, and those of us that know you, that know of your work. We're really grateful. We're very, very grateful. And thank you so much for what you're doing right now.
And I just want to echo that and thank you so much to Cora, to Thomas, to Jessica, to Brittany, and also our wonderful moderator, Chris. Thank you so much. I have to say, I've been tweeting up a storm, and we were just so lucky to have this super panel of activists who are sharing what they're doing. And I hope that our attendees will join us for the next session, in which we'll hear from student journalists who talk about their work to cover the 2020 election as student journalists. And we'll weigh in on questions like, what responsibilities do journalists have to uphold democracy? So please join us, same place, same room, use the same link that you did to get here at 1:30 p.m. And thank you for being with us. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.